Today, we are going to be talking about runic inscriptions in the New World, authentic or elaborate hoax. I am Terry Smith, and this was originally presented at ICMS 2026, held in Kalamazoo, Michigan. So there have long been forgeries of ancient texts, which have led to claims of land ownership. In the modern American landscape, there is a distinct brand of forgeries in the guise of runestones. None are considered authentic, but modern forgeries. One that was not a forgery was a post-1611 runic inscription of the Lord's Prayer. What do these runes mean? What importance do they have? And are there any legitimately from the Middle Ages? Despite any evidence for these runic inscriptions are part of a larger and more nefarious purpose. Within the world of conspiracy theories, there's a growing subsection that seeks to discredit indigenous claims to the land. These runic inscriptions form part of this, claiming that the Vikings, that is, Europeans, were in the United States long before indigenous people, who were, as is claimed, still in Asia, particularly Siberia and/or Mongolia. This claim is, of course, false, but the growing online climate of conspiracy has led to more discourse, and as of now, only online, discrediting of entire tribes. In this presentation, we will explore these runic inscriptions, their significance, their claims, and the historiography surrounding them. It is known that there was Nordic settlement in the United States, or in North America. This is Lansdale Meadows. It is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and has been since 1978. It's at the northern tip of Newfoundland in Canada. Helge Ingstead, in 1960, with his wife Anne, discovered 8 Norse buildings from the 11th century, close to those that were built around 1000 in Iceland and Greenland. It's assumed that the more provincial buildings or the colonies would have had buildings suited to the climate or where they came from, which was Iceland and Greenland. There were elements of the colony, including weaving tools and oil lamps, which marked females at this site. The 8 buildings could have held at most 1,200 people, although it was considerably less than that, most likely. And though it's unknown what the dates of habitation were, the estimates based on available data range from as little as 10 to 15 years, all the way up to 100 or even 200 years. There is a period of lack of indigenous materials from in and around this site and this part of Newfoundland for about 250 to 350 years, which could point to climactic differences or the kind of border issues with this Norse settlement. Other than Lansdale Meadows, there is one other authentic Norse item in the United States. Despite any other evidence in and around Canada, we do have the Maine penny. This is an authentic coin minted between 1067 and 1093. It was found in Brookline, Maine, by amateur archaeologists in 1957. It was found along an extensive Native American train network, which reached all the way up to Newfoundland and was actually found within a strata with tools, most commonly found in the area of the Norse settlement on Newfoundland. Many theorists say it could link to direct Viking contact with the peoples of Maine, which is not wholly unlikely, but due to its sole presence in the strata, it most likely is from that Native American trade network. Though pennies like this were largely found on the market, in the 50s and even before. A glut of them would come up onto the market after World War II with the rebuilding of Europe. And there is some rumors that this was actually put in there to confuse or humiliate the amateur archaeologists. Indeed, the founder of the of this penny, who was an amateur archaeologist, actually believed it to be a British coin until it was donated to the museum in the 70s. It should also be noted that from 1611, there was a significant education in runes. While runes had never fully disappeared and are today still used in decorative use in Dalarna, this post 1611 education was different. This is actually the translation of runes in the same way as an alphabet for use. And we have a section of books here from 1611 to 1833 that are that Runic alphabets, which were used in the Scandinavian, particularly Swedish education system throughout this time period. This was not an ancient language like Egyptian hieroglyphs that needed a Rosetta Stone to be fully translated. This was a language which had never fully disappeared, especially among the educated classes in Scandinavia. And when we talk about runes, there are four specific similarities that will follow all the runes and which will not be touched upon much due to the fact that it is almost the same story with every rune. One is that people like to make their mark. If there was significant amount of Nordic habitation in the area, there would be carving from different years, different ages, as well as archaeological materials, which would be present in or near the locations of the runestones. The runestones don't have any, or they're with associated runestones that are all roughly the same age. As we saw at Lansell Meadows, items would have been left behind even when camps or sites would have been abandoned. Two, they're found conspicuously late by people who tried to capitalize on the discovery. Many of these were found by accident in areas which shortly after were capitalized into a kind of tourist destination. These people also largely put them in newspapers as opposed to universities or other academic environments. Three, many of these ruins were found in areas with significant Scandinavian immigration, both historically and present to when they were found. Many of the finders were actually Scandinavian immigrants themselves and who would have had an education in runes and be able to actually recognize them as runes. And four, many of these runic inscriptions do not use a single alphabet that spans many centuries. Runes, like English, changes over time, and many of these runic inscriptions have grammar that fits more the post 1611 and even more current English grammatical forms. That is, they don't structure the sentences the way of authentic runic inscriptions were, except for that 1611 Lord's Prayer, which was taken directly from the 1611 runic alphabet we saw one slide earlier. The runes which many of these runic inscriptions use are a kind of amalgamation of both younger and elder runes, which would have been separated in common use by at sometimes centuries. It's like using the kind of long S in English. Americans typically don't use that now, despite us still speaking English. And while many of these are hoaxes, it is true that Vikings did like to leave their mark. Here are two runic inscriptions believed to be left by the Varangian Guard which was a elite group of soldiers pulled from the Anglo-Saxons in England and the Norsemen from Scandinavia. The top is basically a graffiti saying, "I was here," at the Hagia Sophia in Constantinople. And at the bottom, we have a lion with more detailed carving of intertwining snakes, which is present in Rome. These are the kind of inscriptions that were quite common and what is more likely to be seen, unlike the runes that we will see a little bit later. What runes are not? So there is a move towards believing that many things are runes that are not. One is the general weathering of rock. Some rock does tend to split vertically and horizontally into configurations that people who do not know writing or runic writing see as runic. Others confuse runic inscriptions with petroglyphs. Petroglyphs are found all throughout the world, everywhere from Australia, the United States, South America, and indeed in the Sami regions of Scandinavia. There's a significant site in Tromsø in northern Norway. This here is newspaper rock from Utah, and we can date it roughly till the 1500s or later as the kind of last indigenous inscriptions by the use of horses. It's widely believed that the site was used for at least 1,000 years. The only runestone which can be authenticated to a possible pre-Columbian founding is Dighton Rock, seen here. In 1680, the petroglyphs on it were drawn, and it was remarked upon in 1690 by Cotton Mather. Between the two, there would be different carvings added. Mather wrote specifically about words or letters being seen. By 1860, the carvings were set more into what was now. From the 1680 drawing, only the uppermost portion was present. In and around 1690, portions of the kind of midsection were added, and sometime between 1680 and the 1860s, the rock was almost completely covered by later additions. It can be said that even before this 1680 view, there was human habitation in the area by both Europeans and colonial peoples, as well as previous Native American writings. And even up until the 1890s into the early 1900s, this was used as a meeting place of the young people when the tide was out. It was removed from its place in 1960s to make room for a dam which would have covered the rock. This rock is also in sandstone and very kind of soft material, and which would have likely been battered by the sea. Very old carvings from 1100 would not have been present on this rock, even if they were. And the wear between the 1893 photograph and the 2015 photograph, with only around 60 years of weathering due to it then being put in the Historical Society, show the kind of differences and the extent of the weathering that would have occurred. Where it is, they attribute it either to Portuguese, which is likely there was Portuguese traders up and down the East Coast from the early 1500s, into the 1600s American Indian, which is also likely as they inhabited the area, although again it would have been just the top portion of that rock. Phoenician, which is even less likely, considering they were Mediterranean almost exclusively, and Norse or Viking, which is also unlikely due to the lack of materials. It's likely that the Vikings could have sailed this far south. They had the technology, but there wouldn't have been basically time to carve this rock. And also, it shows no runic inscriptions in those very earliest drawings and instances. They were likely added later. Next, we have the Barrett Lake Stone in Minnesota. So the inscription on this rock is 1776. Four maidens set camp on this hill. In 1949, an auto salesman discovered it at the farm of Victor Sutherland. Sutherland refused to sell the rock. Sutherland was a farmer who completed his second-grade education, but was convinced that the nearby Kensington runestone was fake. He got the book Leesboek for Volksskolen, book for school, and carved this, aging it with either acid or within a manure pile. Many people believed this to be real, and it was publicized widely, especially after a plaster cast, when looked over by an academic, said that the date was not 1776 or indeed 1876, as Sutherland had anticipated, but 1376, making it close to the Kensington runestone. However, that plaster cast was cast incorrectly. When directly asked, and in a deposition, Victor Sutherland agreed that he had carved it, that he had not anticipated to defraud anyone, which is why he did not sell the item, and that he knew the carver of the Kensington runestone, and this was in part to prove that the Kensington runestone was not real. Another runestone with less evidence is the Havner runestone in Oklahoma. So this is a runestone which was publicized largely in the 1920s. We can see associated carvings by later people around it, and this is a runestone which has a large tourist attraction surrounding it. You can see here that it is now encased in glass. This was another runestone that was supposedly discovered in the late 1800s, with myths and legends tying it back to early Cherokee, Creek, or Chickasaw peoples. Indeed, many of those peoples actually didn't live in the area until after Indian removal, but it's said to date back to the 1600s and used as a marker by those peoples. Its discovery was a little unanticipated. Gloria Farley, who discovered that the inscriptions were actually runes in the 1920s and publicized it wildly, devoting her life to proving it was real. Despite this, and despite it also made of sandstone, a quite porous rock. The first alleged sighting that can be somewhat substantiated is an 1830s Choctaw party, which gave it the name Indian Rock, as they believed it to be Native American writing. Farley perpetuated this, and indeed encouraged the authenticity of this runestone. Today, it is widely believed to be an 19th century hoax, with there being substantial Scandinavian immigration in the area and the incorrect translation to either Nome Valley, which was largely and still widely credited as being somewhat true, although largely would not have been used in this way. There would have largely been other associated carvings, none of which have appeared. Another stone with even less documentation is the Narragansett runestone found in Rhode Island. This stone was not found until 1984, despite multiple surveys of the bay as well as extensive human habitation in the area. This was close to the site of the 17th century Scandinavian colony, as well as many learned people since then. While there was a confession that this was carved in the 60s by a pair of brothers, many residents point that they knew that this was there previously to the 1960s, but again, no evidence has come forward. This is now in a pavilion in the town square. Again, it is made in sandstone and shows significant weathering. It's unknown if this weathering is more present, but since it is in a tidal zone, it is likely that this would have had more wear if it is from the 1300s at the latest. It was, however, believed to be buried, which could cause less weathering, but again, due to the fact of the extensive human habitation in this area and the unsubstantiated claims of it being present before the 1984 survey, it is likely that it had appeared between surveys. The last runestone we are going to, the last stone, which by some conspiracy theorists is seen and deemed to be real, is the Decor runestone in Iowa. This stone translates to "this stone carved I in our Hagen year 1936." This was located in the area, and some conspiracy theories say it's true and say that the date is wrong. But Hagen was a academic interested in the studies of runes and Norwegian literature. He himself was Scandinavian and would have had extensive training in this. This stone also occurred out back of his in-laws' house and has been widely proven to be carved by him in 1936, both from the date on the stone and the fact that it is in his in-laws' backyard. Still, some conspiracy theorists see this as a true runic inscription, despite the dates and the fact that it was found in a known scholar's backyard. So, why was this done? Why did people create and cling to these runestones, which are largely believed to be hoaxes? Well, the reasons for this are convoluted and change depending on the person. Many use this as a part of American exceptionalism and the concept of manifest destiny, and a mark that Americans were given by God, a commandment, and the ability to conquer the land and settle it. A settling or a mark of European inhabitation to 1000 would set a precedent for this, that they were not the first European people to claim this land. The more nefarious case, however, is that it's also used as a tool of white supremacy. In this belief, the flag was planted by white Europeans in 1000 to 1300, and it gives them a claim to exclusively white settlement in these areas. These were areas which were inhabited by indigenous people, but in the kind of more exclusionary aspects of this, they claim that native peoples were brought over to fill the land after this Viking habitation, or that it is part of a universal, largely white European civilization like Atlantis that spread across the globe and somehow fell. Some relate this to the Tower of Babel and separated with the groups, with the Christians in the Levant and Europe being the last great holders on to these ancient beliefs. While there never will be one system which will incorporate the entirety of why these claims are still clung to, it largely goes within these two beliefs. There's also the outdated person who does not listen to facts, who just wants a Swedish ancestor to have been here 1,000 years ago. These are less nefarious, but also some of the most persistent. And that is the end of the presentation.